Hello everyone, and welcome to my YNR Official 24 channel. Jill Abbott, sword-spined, sharp-eyed, and absolutely done guarding anyone, drops a verity so unpredictable it threatens to abolish Kane Ashby from the board entirely, and she does it not with a tale but with a calculated, public reckoning that leaves Billy Abbott reeling and Sally Spectra gaping down the most dangerous crossroads of her life, because Jill's secret isn't just about Kane's history. It's about a crime that no way officially was, a fortune that was no way fairly his, and a chain of events that could destroy Chancellor Winters, Crump Newman Enterprises' fragile détente, and force Billy and Sally to choose between love, fidelity, and non-fictional life, or death consequences, all in a single, suffocating stretch of time where every alternate counts and every regard feels like a trouble. It begins in the most deceptively calm way, with Jill summoning Billy to the Abbott living room under the pretense of agitating commercial restructuring, her voice steady but her eyes blazing with an urgency Billy hasn't seen since the darkest days of Chancellor's hostile appropriations. And when Billy jokes, because that's his armor, because humor is how he deflects the pang of constant pressure, Jill doesn't laugh. She locks the doors, lowers her voice, and tells him that Kane Ashby isn't who he thinks he's and no way has been, that the fascinating accentuation, the redemption bends, the endless alternate chances were all scaffolding erected on a foundation of fraud so deep it reaches back to Kane's foremost days in Genoa City, when he arrived with nothing but ambition and a gift for getting exactly who people demanded him to be. Jill reveals that times are gone. While digging into Chancellor's heritage to cover Catherine's vision, she uncovered a sealed train, buried under layers of legal obfuscation and mislabeled trusts, indicating that Kane had access to, and illicitly abused, a dormant shellpot connected to a long-defunct Australian mining adventure. One that was still siphoning finances through transnational accounts during a period when Chancellor Diligence reported inexplainable losses, and the paper trail, which Jill admits she originally dismissed as coexistence, now aligns impeccably with Kane's unforeseen fiscal solvency during his down-on-his-luck times, his miraculous reclamations after every supposed fall, and the way he always sounded to land on his bases no matter how hard he crashed. Billy's blood runs cold as Jill lays it out. Kane didn't just steal plutocrat, he cleaned it, invested it, and used it to manipulate commercial issues in Genoa City, nudging combinations, sabotaging rivals, and still icing his own indispensability. And the worst part, the part Jill's voice cracks on, is that Catherine may have suspected commodity, but chose not to pursue it, believing that redemption signified further than retaliation, a belief Jill now calls her topmost mistake. Because the final piece of the mystification has surfaced in the form of a falsified death instrument tied to a whistleblower who tried to expose the scheme times agone. And also excessively dissolved, presumed dead after a voyaging accident with no body ever recovered. Billy wants to argue, wants to deny it, wants to believe this is another overreach, another vendetta fueled by old injuries, but Jill produces substantiation, bank transfers, coastal trusts, and a recorded discussion that sends a bite down his chine. Kane's voice, unmistakable, calmly instructing an unknown associate to make sure the problem stays buried. And suddenly Billy understands the magnitude of what Jill is asking of him, because she doesn't want to go to the authorities yet. She wants influence. She wants to force Kane to confess, to surrender the plutocrat, to cover Chancellor Winters from a reproach that could annihilate Devon, Lily, and everyone who ever believed in the company's integrity. Meanwhile, across city, Sally Spectra is fighting a different battle, one that feels just as dangerous, but infinitely more particular, as she navigates the unfaithful terrain of Newman Abbott politics while trying to keep her heart complete, because Sally has stumbled onto a resemblant verity, one Jill doesn't know she knows, after discovering irregularities in a creative backing sluice tied to a silent mate, whose autographs no way relatively match, whose blessings always come through interposers, and whose demands have lately escalated from vague suggestions to unequivocal duns. And when Sally confronts Kane intimately, awaiting bluster or charm, she gets commodity far more intimidating calm, measured honesty laced with a warning, as Kane admits he's in too deep, that adversaries from his history are circling, and that if certain information goes public, people will die. Not directly, not financially, but literally, because the plutocrat he moved wasn't just stolen. It was entangled with felonious enterprises that do'n't forgive or forget. Kane tells Sally that Billy is formally being watched, that Jill has intentionally touched off admonitions by continuing old lines, and that the only way to stop a waterfall of violence is to make a choice that will hang them ever help Kane vanish with what remains of the finances, icing silence and safety, or expose everything and accept the blood that will follow. And Sally, torn between her heart and her fear, between the future she's clawed her way toward and the love she still feels for Billy, realizes she's standing on a fault line that's about to resolve the pressure. Harpoons when Jill, seeing time slipping down, arranges a covert meeting with Kane, believing she can rein him into a controlled concession, but Billy insists on bringing Sally, ignorant that Sally has formerly heard Kane's interpretation of the verity, and the room crackles with implied dread as the four of them meet, each holding a different piece of the lemon, each convinced they're the only one who truly understands the stakes. And when Jill eventually confronts Kane, laying out her substantiation with surgical perfection, Kane doesn't deny it. He smiles sorely and tells her she's late, that the game moved on times ago, that Catherine's mercy bought them time but also painted a target on all their tails, and also he drops his own stunner. The whistleblower isn't dead, he's alive, held as insurance by people who'll execute him the moment authorities are advised, and the evidence, coarse but inarguable, plays out on Kane's phone, silencing Jill and shattering Billy's resoluteness. In that moment, the deadly choice crystallizes because Kane demands an answer now, not hereafter, not after legal counsel, but now, as outside forces near in, as murk move beyond the windows and phones buzz with portentous, enciphered dispatches, and Sally feels the weight of it all crash down on her, because Kane looks at her, not Billy, not Jill, and tells her she's the deciding vote, that her connections, her creativity, her capability to spin narratives could buy them an exit, could save lives, and Billy watches the woman he loves grapple with a decision that could define her ever, knowing that whatever she chooses will change how he sees her and how she sees herself. Jill, unbowed but visibly shaken, refuses to be blackmailed, arguing that Session only empowers monsters, that Genoa City has survived worse, that verity is the only path forward. While Kane counters that verity without strategy is just another form of atrocity, and the argument spirals into raw admissions, Billy admitting his fear of getting his father, Sally confessing she's tired of paying for other people's sins, Jill admitting her guilt over Catherine's heritage, and as the seconds tick by, the sound of approaching peril grows louder, enchantresses in the distance, steps in the hall, a knock that feels like fate itself demanding entry. In the end, or what feels like an end, Sally makes her choice. One that shocks everyone in the room, because she doesn't choose Kane or Jill outright. She chooses a third path, using a last, nanosecond call, a calculated taradiddle, and an immolation that shifts the target off Genoa City and onto herself, agreeing to intimately take the fall for a creative account reproach, drawing attention and heat while intimately easing a controlled release of information that forces Kane's adversaries to retreat without exposing the hostage, a move so parlous it borders on suicidal, and as chaos erupts, alliances fracture, and Kane slips down into the murk with his fate uncertain. Billy realizes the deadly choice wasn't just about life or death. It was about who they're willing to come when there's no clean answer left, and Jill, watching the fate with gashes she refuses to exfoliate, understands that secrets do'n't die, they metastasize, and the war for Genoa City's soul has only just begun. The fallout from that night doesn't explode all at formerly. It creeps, it seeps, it venoms every corner of Genoa City with a slow, merciless ineluctability, because Sally's decision, bold and reckless and terrifyingly brilliant, doesn't end the peril. It simply redirects it, and the shockwaves ripple outward in ways none of them can completely control. Starting with the public implosion that hits the morning news like a guillotine blade, captions screaming about Spectre Creative, accounting reproach rocks Newman, Abbott ties, judges assuming hectically, social media tearing Sally piecemeal with the kind of gaiety reserved for fallen icons, while before unrestricted doors Billy paces like a boxed beast, torn between pride and horror, knowing Sally chose this path to save lives but abhorring that she had to bleed to do it, and Jill, sharp as ever, incontinently recognizes the brilliance and the cost. Because Sally didn't just immolate her character, she came a lightning rod, a distraction important enough to force Kane's shadowy adversaries to indurate, reassess, and pull back rather than threat exposure in the unforeseen light of public scrutiny. Yet Kane himself remains the most dangerous variable, gone without a trace after that night, leaving behind unanswered questions, translated accounts, and a trail of half-trueness that refused to stay buried. And as days pass without a word, paranoia sets in, because silence from someone like Kane is no way peace, it's medication. Jill throws herself into damage control at Chancellor Winters, using every ounce of her authority to firewall Devon and Lily from the reproach's reach, while still moving pieces on a chessboard only she can see, continuing dormant examinations, calling in favors from old legal abetas, and preparing for a future where Kane resurfaces not as a disgraced superintendent, but as a ghost with teeth, and Billy, caught between commercial responsibility and particular fidelity, finds himself visited by the consummation that this is what Kane always did: stylish, turn other people into securities while he slipped through the cracks. Meanwhile, Sally endures the gauntlet, summoned to boardrooms and examinations, her every word deconstructed, her once miscalculations trolled up and weaponized, and though she holds the line with icy countenance, the emotional risk is stunning, because every blameworthiness she absorbs feels like another slip-up laid on her casket, and at night, alone, the bravado cracks, replaced by the eating fear that she's misestimated, that Kane's adversaries won't be wisecracked ever, that she's bought time but not safety, and when an unmarked envelope appears on her doorstep containing nothing but a single expression, "We know why you did it," the terror crystallizes into commodity sharper, commodity critical. Billy is furious when she shows him the note, not at her, but at the entire crooked game that forced her into this position, and for the first time in a long while, his recklessness isn't about chasing adrenaline or proving himself, it's about protection, because he decides, still and without consulting Jill, that he's going to find Kane, not to discipline him, but to force and wind up, believing maybe innocently, that if he can drag Kane back into the light, the monsters lurking in the murk will scatter. Jill senses Billy's shift incontinently, because she knows her son, knows the way his jaw sets when he's made up his mind, and though she warns him that Kane is far more dangerous cornered than free, she also knows that inactivity is its own kind of rendition, so she equips Billy not with blessing but with information, handing him a train marked with Catherine's old button, containing notes that no way made it into any sanctioned record. Notes that suggest Kane wasn't acting alone indeed in the early days, that there was always someone above him. Someone who saw Genoa City as a resource to be gathered rather than a community to insinuate. As Billy digs deeper, following fiscal breadcrumbs that lead him far beyond Wisconsin and into a maze of shell companies and transnational fronts, the compass of Kane's secret grows darker, revealing ties to arms-dealing routes disguised as logistics investments, humanitarian foundations used to censor blood plutocrat, and a nipping pattern of accidents that excluded anyone who got too curious, and the consummation hits him like a punch to the gut. Kane didn't just steal from Chancellor, he used Genoa City as disguise for commodity far unpretty. Commodity that now threatens to surface no matter how numerous offerings are made. Back home, Jill faces her own reckoning as whispers circulate that she knew further than she admitted, that her delayed action allowed Kane's corruption to metastasize, and though she deflects with rehearsed ease, the guilt gnaws at her, especially when she visits Catherine's portrayal late one night and admits audibly that perhaps mercy wasn't the kindness she allowed. Perhaps it was fear disguised as grace, and that admission brands her resoluteness, because Jill Abbott doesn't run from her miscalculations. She confronts them head on, indeed if it costs her everything. Sally's plot takes a darker turn when civil interest escalates from questioning to quiet surveillance, her phone glitching, her meetings intruded, the sense of being watched getting suffocating. And when she receives a cryptic communication arranging a meeting to bandy your future, she knows it's not from the authorities, but from the same unseen forces Kane advised her about, and against Billy's pleas, she goes. Because she understands commodity, he doesn't these people do ent chase they summon, and ignoring them only accelerates the peril. The meeting is brief, nipping, and devastatingly polite. The representative no way naming Kane, but making it clear that Sally's part as a diversion has been noted and appreciated, that her uninterrupted cooperation will ensure everyone she cares about remains unharmed, and that should she falter, the verity about Kane, about the hostage, about the real reason she took the fall, will be released in the most destructive way possible, leaving her not a fatality but a villain, and Sally leaves shaking, eventually grasping the full weight of the web she's caught in. Billy's quest for Kane culminates not in a dramatic battle but in a disclosure that reframes everything when he tracks down an old associate willing to talk in exchange for protection and learns that Kane was no way meant to survive the scheme, that he was a useful conciliator slated for disposal once his mileage ran out, and that his unforeseen exposure was an escape, but a hopeless shot to overrun his own prosecution, a fact that complicates Billy's wrathfulness with commodity dangerously close to empathy, because if Kane resurfaces, it may be not as a villain seeking control, but as a hunted man with nothing left to lose. This pressure explodes when Kane eventually reappears, not in Genoa City, but on a secure videotape feed transferred contemporaneously to Jill, Billy, and Sally, his face haggard, his confidence stripped down to raw urgency, as he admits that Sally's scheme worked, temporarily, but the timepiece is ticking, that the hostage has been moved, that his former instructors are consolidating power, and that the only way to end this is an exposure but eradication, a plan that would bear them to hand over every scrap of substantiation they have, weaponize it against a syndicate, and trust that mutually assured destruction will force a collapse, and the choice he offers is stark: help him burn it all down, or walk down and let the fire ultimately consume Genoa City anyway. Jill's response is nippy and ferocious, rejecting Kane's architecture, averring that they do and come monsters to master monsters. But indeed she see and deny the sense, the terrible fineness of the plan, and Billy watches the two elephants disaccord with the sickening mindfulness that there are no icons left in this story, only survivors and casualties. Sally, formerly again, finds herself at the center, because Kane's plan hinges on her capability to control the narrative one last time, to orchestrate a leak so ruinous and so precisely timed that it forces transnational intervention. And though she's exhausted, bruised, and alarmed, she agrees, not because she trusts Kane, not because she believes in Jill's ideals, but because she refuses to let fear be the final author of her life. The prosecution is harrowing, a high-line act of misdirection and courage, as Sally coordinates with Jill's legal network, Billy's intel, and Kane's compromised access, driving a waterfall of exposures that slam into global requests, indurate accounts, and expose felonious ties so vast they see and be ignored, and for a moment, it seems like it's worked, like the monster has eventually been dragged into the light. But Palm in Genoa City is no way clean, and the cost comes fleetly as Kane disappears again, this time for good. His final communication to Billy a quiet reason that offers no forgiveness, and Sally is taken into defensive guardianship not as an idol but as a liability, her future uncertain, her name ever linked to a reproach she both caused and averted. In the fate, Genoa City exhales, bruised but standing. Chancellor Winter survives. Under violent scrutiny, Jill emerges chastened but unbroken, having eventually recognized Catherine's heritage not through mercy alone but through responsibility, and Billy learns the hardest assignment of all, that loving someone occasionally means letting them make choices you can't fix, can't soften, can't save them from. The final image is hanging and undetermined, as Sally, looking out from behind corroborated glass at a megacity she saved but may no way completely belong to, again, receives a single and signed note slipped under her door, bearing just 3 words that promise this story is far from over. Secrets always return.